The Penguin might just be one of the most interesting Batman shows I've ever seen. I mean, granted, it's the millionth live-action Batman show to not have the Batman, but at least it doesn't take place in a total Batman-less Batman universe, being set shortly after the events of the Batman movie. And let me assure you that this show matches the quality of that movie that spawned it. I continue to be more and more enamored by this universe with each new installment. Every scene is a worthwhile watch. Every episode is a must-see event. There's no room for fluff or filler. This series is filled with complex characters with unthinkably tragic origins. The cast is brilliantly cast, with the series having several show-stealing performances. This story on its own is a great narrative, but in the big picture it also serves the greater narrative, giving this cinematic universe an incredible amount of depth. It expands the established lore and adds layers to the bigger picture, whether that means showing the person behind the punchline or reinforcing the status quo by doubling down on deviancy. It introduces new vital characters to Gotham's hierarchy of power. The return of the Maronis, the resurrection of the Hangman, and the rise of the Penguin. It makes for one promising future for the Batman franchise. And being as this is part of that particular Elseworld, the show sees Colin Farrell come back as the titular character, the Penguin, Oz Cobb, as he's now known, which wasn't always the case prior. It also sees the return of several other characters from the movie, including the city's mayor, crooked cop Kenzie, and even the crime boss Carmine Falcone himself. Though while the character returns, his actor did not, replacing John Turturro as Mark Strong, playing a slightly younger version of the character in flashbacks and news reports. As far as recastings go, it's far from the worst that I've ever seen. They're both quality actors who put in quality performances, and I think the show makes an effort to make the character look and feel the same. Despite the Don's death, he still has a big part to play in Penguin. With his passing comes an uprise of criminals looking to take his place. Gotham's criminal underworld is a hydra. When the Mafia's figurehead is beheaded, several sprout up in its place, which is really the premise of the Penguin. It's the uprise of Oz, or at least his attempted one. You know, master plan pending. The show acts as a character study of the character and the city and circumstances that created him. His disabilities and differences are the key to the character. It is both his motivation and, ironically enough, his Achilles heel. Oz's need for power comes from a lifetime of feeling powerless. He needs to be seen as a big deal in a world that has always made him feel small. He's treated as lesser than by his peers, but he's still a proud man. A man who's too proud to sit in a handicap-accessible spot in spite of him having a handicap. Add to it that those close to him put him down in an effort to try to build him back up, with his own mother asking him,
"If my son is nothing, what am I?"
This series has really showed what makes a character like Oz so threatening, because in spite of having a bad foot, he's still always several steps ahead. He's always in on whatever the plan is, and he always has his own separate ones. The character is a master of manipulation, pulling all the strings and then cutting ties to the crimes that he commits. While he plans well enough, his real strength comes from his ability to adapt to situations, to change plans at a moment's notice, effortlessly playing people with power like they were pawns. Throughout the first 4 episodes of the show, he pits 2 competing crime families against each other, framing a bunch of made men for his own crimes.
You want to survive? You gotta adapt. You gotta respond to the environment, the situation. You gotta think on your feet. You gotta be quick.
Cobb puts the organized in organized crime, paying attention to even the most minute of details. Being able to adjust at a moment's notice should something not go entirely according to plan. The thing is that lying is entirely effortless to Oz. It all comes incredibly easy to him. And not just the act of lying, but the lies it is that he's making up on the spot. He's smart, he's strategic, he's sleazy, but most importantly, he's selfish. He has very little care or regard for others, having loyalty only to himself and the woman that created him. For better or worse, Oz is a survivor. He is the cockroach of the crime game. If a nuke hit Gotham City, he would be all that was left. Yet despite this deep thinking and constant planning, he's still prone to impulsive outbursts when he's talked down to or belittled. When put in a situation where he's rejected, he returns that rejection in spades. As a matter of fact, I would say these moments may just be the character's only true genuine moments, because almost everything outside of this is just a well-coordinated performance. When Sofia talks down to him, he goes over her head and reports back to her father. When Victor asks to leave their operation, he lashes out and puts him down. When mocked for his limp, without thinking twice, he tries to take out Carmine Falcone in public. And when mocked for his dream, he successfully takes out Alberto Falcone in private. His anger in part kickstarts the plot, and creates a worthy enemy to this very dangerous foe.
I'm an asshole. But you're the surprise here.
Excuse me?
Angered and saddened by the sudden loss of her brother, Sofia Falcone is out for revenge, released from Arkham and unleashed on Gotham. She is absolutely unhinged and unpredictable. She seems like she could snap at any given moment whenever she's on screen. You never know where she's coming from, what her intention is, or what her next move might be. In a lot of ways, she's the perfect opponent for Oz. She's just as brilliant and just as brutal. She's someone who knows his games and can play them herself. Everything I said before about Oz could almost be copy and pasted when talking about Sofia, because it still applies, especially when it comes to adapting to survive. That is the whole basis of her story. Her reputation might be justified, but her reason for having that reputation is not. She's referred to as the Hangman, having thought to have strangled or hung several women. Except, in actuality, these women were victims of her father, with her being used as a scapegoat and sacrificial lamb. She's sent to spend a decade in a place that would make hell blush, and being amongst monsters every day turned her into one.
It's like a wise man once said, battle not with monsters, lest you become a monster.
That trauma didn't destroy her, it made her more dangerous. When she was sent away for being something she wasn't, she became what it was that she was claimed to be. She may not have killed all those women, but she did kill all the people that put her in that place to begin with. The only ones who escaped her wrath were the ones who had the luxury of dying before she saw her vengeance. Oz and Sofia are equally matched. There are very, very blatant parallels between the two. Each have their fair share of triumphs through tragedies. But before they became foes, they formed a bit of a friendship, with Oz being her driver and closest confidant. Throughout their feud, there's flashes of their former friendship, where in spite of the situation and in the face of logic, the two somewhat enjoy each other's company, working well together when forced to put their differences aside, and even on one occasion sharing what seemed to be a heartfelt moment, or at least it was on one of their parts. Their partnership is unsurprisingly short-lived, and whatever friendliness there might have been between the two is more than likely past tense, with the way that episode 3 ends with Sofia finding out that Oz killed her brother. Out of every mob boss, crooked cop, criminal, and straight-up villain that this universe has given us, I think that she might just be the most frightening, and more so over the most interesting. I want to talk more about her performance, but I think that deserves a video of its own in the future when the series is done. So I'm gonna save that for another day. But what I will say about it is, in the movie The Batman, Colin Farrell stole the show as the Penguin. In the show The Penguin, Kristen Milioti steals the show as Sofia Falcone. I would even say that the show is just as much her story as it is Oz's. And I mean that. For years, I've seen her in a shitload of projects, and every time I see her, I audibly go, oh hey, it's the mother. But not anymore. Oh, that time is past. From here on out, this is the role that I'm going to remember her for. I know that the next installments in this universe will probably be focusing on other villains, as well they should, but I'd really like to see this character have some sort of interaction with this universe's anchor being. I mean, she is his girlfriend's sister after all, so that's gotta count for something. Speaking of siblings, Sofia's brother Alberto is pretty fun in his limited screen time. He's obnoxious, he's annoying, he's honestly just the worst. But that's what he's meant to be. Alberto is a loudmouth party guy who speaks what he thinks. Although he speaks more than he thinks a lot of the time too. Due to his last name and legacy, he believes everyone else is beneath him, and is far from beyond belittling and mocking those in his company. He has no drive or motivation. He's gotten far too comfortable in the life someone else set up for him, which is probably why his father didn't want him involved in Gotham's crime family. In the comics, Carmine Falcone is against his son joining the family business because he wants him to have a chance at a normal life. Here, he doesn't want his son taking over the family business because he doesn't have a business mindset. If anything, Sofia shows a lot more potential in that regard, which is why Carmine actually asks Sofia to take his place when that time comes, only for him to put his daughter behind bars after she spoke behind his back. His initial decision to replace his son is understandable. Alberto has a bunch of problems, and in that world, that makes him a problem. The show uses a lot of the characters from the comics and cartoons as bit background players, and I kinda love that. I mean, there's years of established lore to pull from. I think it makes more sense to do that rather than make up an entire world worth of new characters. Anything from a passing mention to an episodic side characters on the table here. Like for example, Summer Gleason, a news reporter that got her start on Batman the Animated Series, reappears here as the journalist trying to take down Carmine Falcone. Unfortunately, this ends in her joining the list of victims that she was trying to vindicate. The Falcones bring up a congressman named Hill, which I think could be a mention of Mayor Hill from that same animated series. Vic's father mentions his friend is the cousin of a drug dealer named Squid, which could be a reference to the DC villain Squid, but it could also be nothing. When Sofia's back in Arkham, her first friend and later casualty is the villain Magpie, a thief who has made appearances in many Batman shows over the years. Surprisingly, the character isn't exactly the perfect picture of sanity. If anything, she could probably be the poster child for Arkham Asylum. The should-be Mirror Man even gets a name drop. Oz's girl and constant alibi is named Eve Carlo, which again might not mean anything, but it could also be a sly reference to the comic's first Clayface. But maybe most importantly out of everybody is the introduction of the Maronis, the Falcones' lifelong rivals, a family once respected and feared on the streets of Gotham who have seen better days. Initially framed by Oz with the death of Alberto, they take this as an opportunity to try to restore their name. And while the series has established them as a threat, they haven't really gone into too much detail about who they are. Not enough time is spent with these characters just yet. There are also plenty of story elements that could be applied to many other characters in Batman's rogues gallery. Newspapers report on fires in the area. That could be the implication of Firefly, or hell, maybe even Firebug. The drug bliss that Sofia's pushing, I could very easily see being used as the beta version of several things in Batman's universe. Could be the Mad Hatter's hypnotic tea, the Scarecrow's fear gas, or even some sort of weird play of Hugo Strange. Though since it comes in spores, you could easily tie this plot point to Poison Ivy as well. I'm not saying that any of these things are gonna happen, I'm saying that any of these things could happen, and it would be a seamless incorporation of those characters. There's possibilities here. The show also has several seemingly new additions to the Batman mythos that are wholly original. The series made an interesting decision in giving Oz an accomplice, and maybe more accurately an apprentice. After a group of teens mess with his ride, Oz takes one of them in, first as a hostage, and then as an errand boy. He has this kid work for him as his heavy, until he could dispose of him later, though ultimately Oz winds up taking mercy on the kid, I think due to their shared unsuspecting nature. Oz with his limp and Vic with his stutter. Vic ends up aiding Oz in whatever it is he needs, working with him on odd jobs, and occasionally being someone for Oz to bond with. In a lot of ways, this kid feels like the Penguin's Robin. As a matter of fact, he has a lot in common with one in particular. There's a lot to compare between he and Jason Todd. Both tried to steal the rims off a car in Gotham only to be taken in and then employed by their attempted victim of vandalization. Both have origins of sorts rooted in tragedy. Both have lost their parents. They're similar. Maybe not in nature, but in backstory. Now mind you, this isn't me submitting my fan theory, this is just me merely making a comparison. Vic isn't a bad kid he's a good kid who's done bad things to survive. Or, alternatively, a kid who did dumb things because he's a kid. In a short time, Vic lost everything. He lost his family to the Riddler floods, he lost his friends to Oz's retaliation, and he lost his girl to Opportunity. In the end, he's lost himself. And though he knows he doesn't want to go down the route that Oz has, it is the only pathway he can see at this time, having both respect and fear for the man who took him in, seeing him equally as a captor and a mentor. I do think Vic grounds Oz a lot and helps show his character in a different light. Oz often gets lost in the moment, living up to the persona that he's creating. But Oz isn't playing the part when he's with Vic. He's bestowing life lessons on him, he's punishing him, he's showing him the consequence of error. In a weird way, he becomes sort of a father figure to him. That's why when Vic is shown that he's had freedom all along, in spite of his better judgment, he still saves Oz. Honestly, this story is so well told in such a short amount of screen time, it gives me hope for one day seeing a Robin story told right on the big screen. I mean, once again, this isn't that, but it's similar enough. Out of all these characters, I would say that once again the city is the star. It's got such a raw, gritty realness to it. Following the events of the Batman, the city is in ruins, and the criminal underworld is in shambles. This is Gotham at its most desperate. Perhaps worse off than it's ever been before. It really emphasizes the need for the Batman, showing him as a hero in a city of villains. The story smartly follows the formula of the Batman, slowly unraveling with each scene. Every scene making its audience recontextualize everything that's come before it. It's a slow burn that burns each of the characters differently along the way. I've watched and rewatched these episodes several times over already. I think the show is highly addicting and definitely well worth a binge watch. And that's just the beginning. With that being said, if you like this video and would be interested in seeing me check out the rest of the show when it finally drops, maybe even doing a deep dive into the Batman movie before the Batman 2, let me know in the comment section below by leaving a comment saying,
The Batman is back in Gotham!
I am vengeance. I am the night. And that was V Infuso. Just remember, if you're not tuning in, then you're missing out.
So, if you like the words that came out of his mouth hole, and you too would like to become a V-generate, don't forget to like and subscribe. Thanks for watching, nerds!
And if you're not joining the fun, you're in for one bad day. And you know what they say about having one bad day?
Catch him next time. Same bat time. Same bat channel.